You know, before the weekend, my copy of Darkhawk #1 cost $20. After the weekend, still costs $20. Better than I can say for my Apple stock. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this one, we need to talk about Black Monday. But no, I am not referring to the slaughtering bloodbath that is going on in the S&P 500 right now. I'm talking about this. Black Silver Surfer #1 covers in CGC 9.8, selling for the same price that they did earlier in the year. While comics may not necessarily be going up in price, they're not necessarily going down in price, at least not as down as they used to be going down, and certainly not as far down as other assets out there in the economy, which begs the question, have comic books hit the bottom? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about it. But of course, before I get into it, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I would appreciate it. Helps support the channel and doing those things. But let us get into this video. Now, this past weekend, we had the Heritage Platinum auction, a lot of big books going up for sale, a lot of big original art going up for sale as well. I wanted to take the time in this video to talk about some of the sales and highlight some of the things. While, you know, I started this video with a little bit of an intro of like, oh, comic books are not necessarily going down. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all sort of case by case still, right? There's still a lot of those books in this auction that did go down in value, and there's a lot of books in this auction that did pretty well overall. I guess sort of the main takeaways or the main interesting ideas as it relates to, you know, what's going on and, you know, the economy right now with tariffs and the culture and all that stuff is that surprisingly, the comic books buyers, you know, they showed up this past weekend. Like, seemingly, you know, they came to play a little bit. And, you know, we didn't see like, you know, this massive 20% or 40% drop of like, you know, the previous sale for a lot of comic books, including this one right here, which as you guys can see was one of the premier books from this Heritage auction, Silver Surfer #1 in a CGC 9.8, the very, very tough all black cover. I believe there's 10 CGC 9.8s on the census selling for $132,000, which I was shocked that this book got that number, because earlier in the year on Heritage Auctions, we also had this book right here, the Silver Surfer 9.8, the Boston Pedigree, and this one had white pages compared to the one that recently sold with off-white to white pages, and this book got $132,000 in January. So I would have been, you know, pretty confident going into this auction that this one was going to take a bit of a haircut, like that this one was going to be drop back down, you know, obviously above, you know, the previous sale at $27,000 back in 2017, but like, I don't know, you know, under six figures or something like that, but it didn't, you know, it actually held its price, which is kind of shocking. So it's kind of amazing that there was another person willing to pay this price for this particular book. And, you know, if we're talking about, you know, year to date, you know, as far as like an investment is concerned, the person who bought this book, I mean, while it hasn't gone up in price, you know, it hasn't gone down in price either. I mean, this is technically at this moment in time, you know, beating Bitcoin, beating the S&P. So I guess Silver Surfer 1, you know, your all black covers in 9.8s are a better buy than that of other stuff out there in the economy. Let's take a look at some of the other interesting sales right here. Marvel Spotlight #32, the original art cover done by Gil Kane, selling for $690,000. Definitely a lot of money. I mean, not, you know, the record price that we saw, say, for the ASM 194 cover, although I would suspect that there's probably more people interested in the first appearance of Black Cat. I think Black Cat is clearly a more popular character than Spider-Woman, but, you know, at $690, this definitely beat the price that the Wolverine 1 Buscema cover sold for, and I think that that's a pretty decent sale. We had this Frazetta painting that sold for $528,000, definitely not anywhere near what other Frazetta paintings sell for. Sometimes Frazetta paintings go for $1 million, $2 million, things of that nature, but, you know, in my opinion, I don't think this is necessarily Frazetta's best work. So I think getting 528 seems like a pretty decent sale for me. We had the Tales of Suspense first interior panel for Iron Man selling for $504,000. Also still a pretty strong sale. I mean, first interior panel, you know, it is obviously a very, very significant page. It's the most expensive page that has sold of Tales of Suspense 39. We've seen in the previous, you know, few auctions that Heritage had a bunch of pages from this particular comic book. So you have to assume that this was coming from the same owner that's been, you know, drip feeding and consigning these pages over time. I actually do wonder if the person who is selling this stuff owns the Tales of Suspense 39 cover. And if they do, that would really be the prize one because, you know, while this is the first interior artwork of Iron Man, I mean, I guess technically you could say that the cover is the true prized possession to own. And I would have to think that that cover would sell for $1 million plus. Moving ahead now, I think there's some other interesting sales to talk about, like this X-Men #1 in a CGC 9.0 selling for $108,000. And what I think is the most impressive thing about this is, again, the stability that we're now seeing for a lot of these books where, I pulled up the recent sales for the Universal 9.0s, and you can see this last one was 108. We had one in March on Comic Connect sell for 109. That's basically the same price. We had a sale all the way back in January of 2023 for $102,000. We also had another sale in that same month for $108,000. And so you guys can kind of see, this has basically been the price. And while that hasn't necessarily been, say, a good investment, return on your money over the course of these last 2 years, if we're in a place where, the stock market is absolutely going to go to zero and everything is going to crash, it's pretty impressive that this book is even holding up at this price overall. You can look from the graph. Obviously it got inflated in COVID when there was a sold price for, 156, 185, and we've kind of gotten that froth out. But now we've seen a couple sales in a row that is clearly above what it was going for early 2021, late 2020, and is now pretty consistent. So kind of interesting to see that. Similarly with this Fantastic Four #1, this one sold for $78,000. And similarly, if you go down here to the 7.5, the last 7.5 sale was in November, again on Heritage Auctions for $78,000, which again is less than what it was going for at its height of 168 and less than what it was going for in 2022. But I think we can consistently say now that a lot of the sales that occurred in 2021 and 2022 were generally overinflated. And now we've kind of got the froth out, and now they're not dropping as much as we're used to seeing them drop. Similarly, we have a Hulk 181 Bronze Age book this time, $72,000 sale. If we go down here to the 9.8s and look at some of the recent 9.8s, this is a book that basically always goes up for sale. Previous one to this on Golden Auction, $62,000. Previous to that, $72, $72, $56, $66, $72, $78. So a little bit up and down, but even in this month alone, we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sales in this month alone. Still a book that's getting $72,000. So while it kind of oscillates up and down, that's, again, better performance than that of the S&P 500. Of course, while there were big sales, there was also some corrections as well. We saw 2 Chamber of Chill books sell this past auction, $28,800 for a 7.5 and also $12,000 for a 4.5. And as we can go into, both of these recent sales, we can see that the 7.5, previous sale to this was $31,050 and now we're at $28,800. So a little bit of a haircut for this particular book, dropping down $3,000. Similarly with the 4.5, we saw this recent one go for $12,000, but the previous ones to this were $16,150 and $17,400. So this one also taking, a pretty sizable haircut. We also had books like this, Detective Comics #38, first appearance of Robin, selling for $45,600 in a 6.0 copy. If we go over to, recent 6.0 copies, we can actually see that the last sale for this book was actually $64,000 in 2019. So a pretty awful return for the Boy Wonder. Similarly, we had a book like this, Detective Comics #168, first appearance of Red Hood in a CGC 7.0, selling for $27,600. If we go over to, recent comps for this book, we see that it's sold, $31,000 in 2022, $33,000 in 2022, and then now back down to $27,000. So taking a $5,000 loss for this particular book. So again, not all Golden Age books are able to, sustain their floor. They don't always hold up in price. Sometimes there are corrections, and certainly, in Silver Age and Bronze Age and Copper Age, there's a lot of corrections. So with the comic books, some up, some down this past weekend, but overall, I think what's the most impressive part of it is that in the aggregate so far, it's been able to kind of hold up, relatively speaking, compared to that of, other assets that we've talked about. But of course, that doesn't mean comics are going to the moon or they're not going to continue to drop down. In fact, I would say that over the course of, this calendar year, I would suspect that, at least the graded values for, common key books are going to continue to go down a little bit. A lot of the books I've pointed out so far are obviously, books that are high 5 figures, 6 figures at times. I think those ones maybe are going to be able to hold up, for that specific type of buyer. But if we're talking about fairly common books, your ASM 129s, ASM 50s, things like that, especially in the mid-grade, I think that those could still continue to go down, And if we look at, the index that GoCollect puts together, we can actually see if we just go to the past 3 months, even for this, what do we see? We're still seeing the trend going down, albeit at this point, going down less than that of other charts. You can see right here, the past month, 1,714, they say that is the CPI value. And now it's 1,713. So really not that big a deal, or really not that far down. And if you kind of zoom in on some of their books, like you can see some of them are up, some of them are down, but, you know, not too drastic, not too drastic. And that's really one of the things with comic books in general is like, I kind of feel like we saw the big dump, you know, the last couple years or so, you know, people definitely checking out. You know, one of my conversations that I had on my live stream when I was covering this auction last week, you guys can check that one out. I'll probably put a link in the description. But one of the things I mentioned is that just the consignments that we've been seeing at these auctions, I think is really telling the story. Like, while we do see, you know, great grails and keys like a Silver Surfer 1 and a 9.8 and things like that, we're not seeing the same, you know, crazy consignments that we saw in 2022 and 2021 and all of that, where we were seeing like a Detective Comics 27, an Action Comics 1, an AF-15, and a 9.6, like all in the same auction. You know what I mean? It was like 5 Hulk 181s and CGC 9.8s, like all in the same auction. Like, we're not really seeing that anymore, which I guess, you know, anecdotally suggests to me that there's just not as many people trying to get out of comic books. You know, it's at a certain point when all that stuff was hitting the market, like there's only so much money that was going to absorb everything. Now it's sort of like, okay, we're trickling it out, and it's like, okay, this Hulk #1 in a CGC 9.0 is like your key book. That is like the one on the market. Shout out to Dave from Comic Book Investments. If we go back to, you know, basically just like the main page right here, we can see that, yeah, there's probably less money overall going into these auctions. Like before, you would actually see multiple lots that were hitting the $1 million range. Now it's, you know, the top lot is 690 here for this original art, 528 for this, 504, 336. And, you know, of the top, what do we call this? 12 lots right here, only 3 of them are comic books. You know, most of them are original art. So on the one hand, you could say that not a lot of people are putting money into comic books. Or on the other hand, you could say we're just not getting the consignments that we were getting compared to the other years, which means that there's more holders, which means that everything is more stable, at least in this near term. Anyways, that's all for this video. That was me talking a little bit about this past weekend sales. Black Monday is here, except not necessarily in comic books, because comic book sales were okay. Were okay. I mean, they weren't like crazy record numbers, and there were certainly a lot of books that sold pretty weak overall. But, you know, when I compare it to what I expect books to go for these days and like how there should be corrections, you know, even when there are corrections, I'm like, yeah, well, that makes sense. You know, even like a Detective Comics 168, it's like, yeah, it has a $5,000 haircut, but it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, compared to the 2022 price, which was way too high to begin with, even for a rare Golden Age book. Anyways, that's all for this video. Let me know what you guys think about the current market conditions right now. What do you guys think about comic books? How are you guys feeling about comic books going forward? Did you guys think that this was a great auction this weekend? Did you guys think that it was really weak overall? Do you think it was really strong? How do you think it compares to, you know, everything going on in the stock market right now? Let me know in the comments. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See y'all in the next video.